The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the show. The COP28 summit is in session as we speak in Dubai. President Ranil Wickremesinghe is in attendance. But in terms of development and sustainable development, how has Sri Lanka fared? Let's find out. My guest tonight is Professor Siri Hettige, Emeritus Professor, University of Colombo. Good evening and welcome to the show, Professor.
Good evening.
Professor, let's speak a bit about the developmental framework fabric in Sri Lanka. We attach a lot of dependence and importance to the institutional fabric, as we probably should. We need to rely on institutions as opposed to individuals. However, where institutions fail to deliver, where they are ineffective, or riddled with delays in their functionality, or even dysfunctional at times, what do we do?
Well, the Sri Lankan case is in a way very sad, because we have established all the institutions that you can think of in various sectors to address various issues that we confront. Now you talked about the development. Now, the development process has to be managed, based on policies that we agree on. Now, when you look at the development process, who is really, driving this development process forward in terms of, let's say, policy development, in terms of guidance and so on and so forth. In fact, in Sri Lanka, we started fairly well in this regard, I would say, because the National Planning Council was established in Sri Lanka in 1957. In other words, we had the eminent people sitting around the table, representing different areas of work, various of different disciplines and so on. And they were basically, looking at various development issues, welfare issues and so on and so forth, and they were coming up with policy proposals, and they were basically taken up very seriously by the powers that be, and as a result we were able to really manage the development process in reasonably well, I would say, and as a result we managed to balance between, let's say, development on the one hand and public welfare on the other hand. Public welfare, because you see, Sri Lanka after independence, it was not a developed country naturally, and we had a growing population and we had a very vast rural population, and there were inequalities already, as a result of some of the policies that were followed before that. So the point is that we had to really be very serious about managing the economic development process. But then this Planning Council basically provided the framework for decision making. For instance, they basically said that we have to have a balance between different sectors, agriculture, industry and services. Now you have to have a balance, and if you have no balance between these three sectors, you have a fairly distorted economy, because for instance, agriculture is so important because that's the only way that we could, produce enough food, for instance. And then also the raw materials that are necessary to, build up industries and so on and so forth, like agro-based industries and so on. And also we needed, other raw materials like rubber and so on and so forth. So agricultural sector was so important. And then the industries, without industries, you are totally dependent on imports. That is not possible, because when you have a growing population with higher aspirations for consumption and so on and so forth, you are going to depend more and more on industrial products. It's not just food and other few things. No. So the problem is that we could not really manage without industries, and therefore industry was given high priority in this country, and therefore we developed an industrial base as well. So we had a plethora of industrial industrial activities. And then of course the services, as you know, is very critical, like health, education, transport and so on and so forth. So we managed to have a fairly reasonable balance between these three sectors. But then thereafter what happened was that this National Planning Council was abolished in the late 70s, and as a result what happened was that the economy was not managed properly, and as a result we have had a very distorted economy for the last 4 decades. So the point is that we are totally dependent on imports for industrial goods. That is what led to this huge gap between, let's say, imports and exports. I mean, the income that we were getting from outside and the amount of money that we had to spend to import all these things. So the trade gap widened continuously, and that continued to widen over the last 4 decades, and as a result we had to really turn to other sources of foreign exchange to really fill this trade gap. Now, for instance, we had to export labor. Export of labor became the largest source of foreign exchange for Sri Lanka. But the point is that that you cannot really have such an imbalance between different sectors, and that is really a major issue that we have not been able to resolve even to this day.
How does one go about reversing the erroneous mismanagement decision making that has taken place over decades, in your opinion?
No, actually we have no choice. No, I mean, in modern societies we have to rely on knowledge coming from expertise. We have no choice. Like, for instance, if you take medicine, we have no choice. No, we have to rely on expertise, medical expertise. Otherwise you will not have a good medical system. But fortunately for us, in Sri Lanka we developed the medical expertise, and as a result we managed to have a fairly decent health system in this country. I think it applies to all the other sectors as well. But the point is that we did not accept this principle in other sectors. We did not rely on experts. I mean, once you abolish a National Planning Council, who is going to guide you in terms of let's say what to do, what not to do, how to do, and so on and so forth. The point is that guidance has to come from experts. Now this is true for all the sectors, whether it is transport, health, education, and so on and so forth. So I think we have to have a balance between, let's say, experts making a significant contribution to decision making on the one hand, and of course politicians from time to time also taking certain decisions based on maybe their own ideas and whatever, maybe their party policies and whatever. But the point is that we have to really establish the principle of managing things based on knowledge. It's called knowledge management. Now, when you look at the situation that you have in the East Asian region, today, you could easily see that, because they are politicians, I mean, certainly asserting themselves obviously, but on the other hand they have taken a backseat when it comes to critical areas of decision making, when it comes to economic management of institutions, management of services, management of welfare programs, and so on and so forth. So you have enough people around to really provide you with the necessary guidance based on evidence and knowledge. Now that principle has to be taken seriously by any government. But in Sri Lanka, what happened was that this practice was somehow neglected in Sri Lanka, and as a result we have not been able to really guide the development process in the way that we would have, and as a result, of course, we have had serious problems. But of course this is not the only issue that we have. I mean, as I already mentioned, the institutional fabric is so critical. All the institutions that we have established have to be made use of to address various issues in various sectors. Now the point is that we have not been able to do that, because I can say that politicization of institutions has been a major problem in this country for many years. Now that actually has resulted in a breakdown of some of the institutions, and they have become ineffective, and in some cases they have become even dysfunctional. But then we have these institutions, we have to maintain those institutions, but we are not getting what we should get out of these institutions. No, I think so. That's the problem.
Right. Are you saying that currently in Sri Lanka there is no overarching structure which is holistic in nature, where all the different stakeholders, for example, if we take all the ministries, there are aspects which are cross-cutting, for example, reconciliation or education. Is there no system or mechanism through which all these ministries, government departments are interlinked and interconnected?
I think there can be some degree of autonomy for certain sectors. Like for instance, you don't have to really integrate everything. But the point is, if you take the economy, that is one sector that has to be really managed in an integrated fashion.
Right.
And you have to have a holistic view of the economy. You see, so that is where, intersectoral action is very critical. Like for instance, there has to be, let's say, very strong coordination between different sectors. Agricultural sector cannot be isolated, because agricultural sector depends on so many other areas. Like for instance, agricultural sector needs inputs, industrial inputs, you see, and therefore agricultural sector has to be developed in line with the industrial areas. And the same with the services. I mean, for instance, if you really don't have a coordination across these sectors, then you have a fairly disjointed situation. Now that I think can really create major problems. As you rightly said, there are so many issues that we are grappling with, but the point is that there has to be we have to make use of the institutions that we have. Say for instance, one can say that education is so important from the point of view of national reconciliation. From the point of view of national, because it's an identity issue that we are grappling with. It's identity politics that we are grappling with in this country for the last 50 years or more. Now, who is producing these identities, and who is producing these? It is the education system. We have a highly segregated education system in this country. If you look at the school census, you will see how divided our entire education system in terms of ethnicity, religion, and language. Right? Ethnicity, religion, language. So the point is that reconciliation means bringing people together, not keeping people apart. No. Now, if you start, keeping children apart when they are growing up, naturally they grow up with their own exclusive identities.
Right.
And it's very difficult to really bring them together later on. So the point is that this has been going on for so long that people don't even think about it anymore.
Absolutely.
But so the point that I'm trying to get at is now language is such a critical thing. We have been trying to teach a second language. Now, for instance, we started learning. You learn your mother tongue anyway. You learn your Sinhala or Tamil, but then later on you have to learn a second language and a third language. But then the second and the third language teaching in Sri Lanka has been a total failure over the last several decades, right? And not that we did not know, but the point is that it's a policy decision that matters. Is it possible to really promote, let's say, integration? Is it possible to promote integration at different levels? Of course. It's not only in the classroom. You have to also think in terms of how you could really bring different groups of children, different groups of young people, different groups of citizens, and so on and so forth, so that they will learn to appreciate each other. They will appreciate each other, and then they will also want to really cut across some of those divisions that are there, and so on. So the point is creating opportunities to meet and interact and learn from each other. Now that I think has to start in school. But in this country, of course, we have not been able to do that, and as a result, we have had serious difficulty. But I think it is the same with so many other areas that we can think of.
All right, let's continue the conversation after this short commercial break. We'll be right back.
The People's Platform.
Inflation, exchange rates, and the rise and fall of the stock market. Bringing you insights into the business world. Watch the Business Buzz every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. on TV1.
Opposition voices concern over not summoning the COPE committee.
තිබෙන වගකීමට අනුකූල නොවන විදිහට හැසිරීම මුළු කෝප් සභාවම කඩාකප්පල් විය යුතුද?
පාර්ලිමේන්තුව නැවත ගැනවන්න වැඩපිළිවෙල සකස් කරොත් මේ කමිටු සියල්ලම අවසන් කරනවා.
Ruling party opposes opposition leaders questioning. Fuel prices revised, but no revision in transport fares. Mervyn Silva set on a new political journey.
ආතික ධනය මංකොල්ල කාපු ලෑස්තුවක් අපිට හම්බෙලා තියෙනවා. උඹලත් ලෑස්තු යල්ල මන්නාරමේ ගිහිල්ලා නඩු අහනකන් ඉන්න. වැලිකට ඒ දාන්නේ නැහැ. යන්න ලෑස්තු.
Pastor Jerome Fernando remanded. World AIDS Day commemorated today.
HIV සම්ප්‍රේෂණය සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම බලපා ගන්නට හැකියාව තියෙන බව දැනට සායනික පරීක්ෂණවලින් ලෝකයේ තහවුරු කරලා තියෙනවා.
මම මේ කරන ආදරේ පිරිසුදුයි වගේම ස්ථිරයි. හොඳට ගැලපෙන ජෝඩු.
පත්තන්ටිය එක්ක මගේ බොහොම ගැඹුරු බැඳීමක් තියෙනවා.
අද රාත්‍රී 9:30ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්. The People's Platform.
Welcome back. Where did development go wrong? Let's discuss with Professor Siri Hettige, Emeritus Professor, University of Colombo. Professor, we spoke about the politicization of institutions. Is it too far-fetched to reimagine Sri Lanka as a meritocracy, where people are appointed to public office based on their skill, their expertise, their imagination?
Well, in fact, Sri Lanka emerged as an incipient meritocracy after independence. Because in the 60s and the 70s, when we were very, school and so on, so forth, we remember, how people were appointed to various institutions and how they were, selected. I think the point here is that if you have a very specialized institutions dealing with a particular area of research or development of activity. Now say we have research institutes, medical research institute, industrial research and training. So the point is that if we don't really get the most competent and qualified person to lead that institution is not going to function effectively to serve the purpose for which it was established. Now that is why that principle is very, very critical, for a modern society, because we are dealing with very complex issues. We are dealing with very complex issues where knowledge and expertise can be the most critical factor. For instance, now we are grappling with this massive climate crisis. No?
Yeah.
Now here we have institutions, we have established institutions, we have a climate secretariat.
Yes.
Now the question is whether we can really make use of these institutions that we have established in different sectors if we don't have the right people appointed to lead these institutions, provide the necessary guidance and so on. Now I think here we started quite well, and for instance if you look at the first National Planning Council, when we look at the persons who were appointed to the National Planning Council, they were really the most eminent people in different related sectors. Like for instance, university academics professors were appointed also to that council. Now this principle cannot be violated in a modern society, because we depend so much on these institutions, and if the institutions do not perform, we fail. That is why we have to really take this very seriously. Now the point is that when we started politicizing institutions, politicizing our institutions in various sectors, and appointing politically connected people, you don't really get the right kind of person to provide the necessary leadership and the guidance. But then the other side of the coin is that the people who are around, if they are more competent and so on and so forth, they get demotivated and they might leave. So we have actually had a situation in the country that more and more people left Sri Lanka because they did not consider this as a place where you have equality of opportunity.
Right.
Right. For instance, so we have had this out migration of talent over the last 50 years or more, and it actually has been accelerated in more recent decades.
Sure.
And as a result, we have probably had not the right people to provide the necessary leadership in these institutions. I think this is a very major issue, and actually this was recognized by the leaders in East Asia. And we have seen how rapidly those countries developed, not just economic development but also other sectors, health, education, transport, environmental, programming. All these things. So the point is, so the governments have to, on the one hand, retain what you have, the talent. On the other hand, attract, new talent if you can from outside. Especially people go out for training, further education and so on and so forth. You should have a plan to attract them back. So reverse flow is very important. The people can go out because that's very important, because then they get the training and the expertise and the experience, then they come back and so on. So you can see the reverse flow playing a very major role in the development of many countries. Now I know in East Asia, many people left the country for education and further training, and they even worked elsewhere. But then the governments in these countries actually did everything to attract as many of these people as possible. Now I know in the case of India, actually they introduced even a new category of citizenship, non-resident Indians. Non-resident Indians mean they were even given a passport. They are living overseas, but then their talent is being made use of in various ways. Like for instance, they are invited to come and stay in India for 3-4 months, train people, work with the colleagues in these country, in these institutions and so on. So the point is that I don't think that we have been able to do anything like that in this country. So we have basically lost so much talent. And when you travel around the country, you realize that that lot of the Sri Lankan talent is scattered in different countries, you see. And we are a small country, so naturally we can't afford to lose too many talented people, but then we have not been able to retain them. But if you retain them and if you give them the right place, like hand over, let's say, an institutions to manage, maybe that person would have done quite well. And that person would have probably also given leadership, guidance and so on and so forth. So I think this meritocracy is a very major thing in the development process in the modern world, because living in a very competitive world. And the people can move around after globalization. People started moving around, both skilled and unskilled people, as well as highly talented, highly qualified people. So the problem is how to really manage human resources within the country so that you have the talent that you need to manage very complex issues that we are confronted with. But the point in this country is that we have not been able to do that, and that has been partly related to, I would say, politicization of institutions.
I'd like your feedback also on having a solutions-oriented approach. What next from here?
Well, I think we have to accept where we have gone wrong. I mean, we have to accept, that we really did not manage our public affairs in the way that we should have. I think that's the fundamental issue. You can't really mismanage, various, issues, because then they start, becoming, intractable. Therefore, you certainly have to, make sure that you do not mismanage. Now, for instance, I remember UNESCO introduced a very, very major idea. It was called MOST, Management of Social Transformation. Societies undergo transformation. But the processes of transformation have to be managed. If you don't manage a transformation, then you create more problems than you really solve. And now, for instance, when we liberalized our economy in 1977, so much change happened in this country, and that process actually had to be managed. And I don't think that we really managed the process of transformation that unfolded in Sri Lanka after liberalization.
Are we in a state of free fall?
I think the main problem is that we let things happen rather than we make things happen.
Right.
For instance, when people when we have a widening trade gap, you should find out how to bridge the trade gap. Instead of bridging the trade gap, what we did was we looked for earning foreign exchange so that we could pay for what we import. Instead of developing our productive sectors so that we will produce enough things for our own consumption, we continue to import.
Right.
Now, say for instance, industrial goods have to be imported because we don't have any industries anymore. So the point is that it's a massive structural problem. But the point is, instead of trying to find out how to really promote productive sectors so that we will be producing some of the things that we need. Now, for instance, like we are living in a very technically oriented environment today with all the gadgets around. But what do we produce? Do we produce a single mobile telephone in this country? We don't produce a bicycle. But then look at our roads. They are full of all the cars that you can think of. No, the point is we don't produce a single car. So the point is that you have to really figure out how to address a problem when it emerges. Now that we did not do. As a result, things got completely out of hand. Actually, now we are in a very serious situation because we could not really manage these problems that were coming up from time to time. And I think this imbalance that we have in the economy has to be addressed forthwith. Otherwise, we will be living with this for the rest of our lives.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Siri Hettige. Thank you for your perspectives, and I think this is a continuing conversation. Hope to see you very soon again in our studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again next Monday with Monday's edition of the show. Have a safe weekend. Good night.